us. And then Scott, you can let people in as we go, as we continue. So vets, military family, and partners, welcome. This is our 9th Maryland Smith Veteran Transition Panel. The last one, if you're able to join us, was on preparing the E-Fair. And then tonight, we decided to focus as we start the rush of summer internships and transition hiring on hitting the ground running in your first 30 days. Methods, tactics, techniques, procedures, best practices approved. You're not just fully on board with a new employer, but you're also upward headed as you continue to work for them. Before we dive in though, some quick admin items. First, forum rules, please mute your mics unless you are speaking, but turn on your camera if you can so our speakers don't feel lonely as they're looking at their screens. Turn on your and before you send questions, excuse me, in chat or raise your hand, wait to be called on by a host when we get to the forum portion. And then as you launch into your question or before you launch into your question, let us know who you are, where you're coming from, what your circumstances are, why you joined us. We'd like to get to know you as we go through the questions and answers. Also note that as referenced in the invitation, and as I mentioned, the session is recorded for post to platforms that allow access by Maryland students, alumni, and community partners. So your participation from this point on implies consent to that recording. Second, a moment as always to honor our comrades who can't join us today because they're deployed either in military service or as members of other uniformed services. Thanks. Okay, a warm welcome to some special Maryland Smith partners who have been invited today. So if you're here, thanks to our relationship with the Alliance of Veterans affiliated Big Ten Business Schools, 4Block, Corporate Gray, eMentor, or the Mid-Atlantic Veteran Business Outreach Center, we're thrilled to have you. Thanks for joining us. Next, a little bit of context for these events, just for background. Our vet transition panels are actually part of our overall initiative for veteran lifelong leadership. It's an initiative that is Maryland's open platform to promote vets as strategic assets for a united economy. And vet transition panels in particular support one of 3 missions in that initiative, namely to enhance our collective and individual vet present value with subject matter experts. So if you're interested in knowing more about the initiative or getting involved, you can see the email. You can reach out to me personally, Frank Gertner, or rhsmithvets@umd.edu. Happy to include you as we continue to build it. Okay, so getting into our actual panel event, this is our agenda. We're going to start off with a pop quiz, just to kind of warm you up, get you engaged. And then we'll proceed to panel discourse with our panelists tonight. And then finally, we'll do some Q&A to discuss what issues you came to us with as you are in your transition, career transition. So pop quiz. I'm going to go ahead. You will get 3 minutes here to answer some questions on veteran hiring and onboarding. All right, Scott, can you give me a thumbs up that the quiz is up? Okay, thanks. All right, we got answers coming in, so it's working. It's good news. All right, that's 3 minutes, and it looks like we've actually got we've got everyone answered. So we'll go ahead and end the poll, and we'll run through the answers here. Share the results as well, so you can look at it as we go. Okay. So question number one, current US veteran unemployment rate, which is reported, recently reported from March 2022, is 2.4%. So that's actually the lowest in 2 years. It is not a record low, but it's very close to the record low of 2.3% that was recorded in April of 2019. And it is lower, 1.4% lower than the reported non-veteran unemployment rate. So actually 3 of you got that right, so great job. All right, question number 2, the current post 9/11 Gulf War II veteran unemployment rate. So within that, obviously that's the previously reported number, 2.4% is all veterans. Of that, what most of us are, obviously post 9/11 veterans, unemployment rate is 3.3%, so slightly higher. That's actually the lowest of that cadre is Gulf War I veterans. So in other words, veterans that were between Desert Storm and 9/11. They are at about 1.4%. Anyway, post 9/11, and then the other interesting point is that post 9/11 veteran participation rate is actually at a a record high right now of 81%. So that means that the vast majority of post 9/11 veterans are out in the market and participating. All right, question number 3. In which of the following industries are vets likely to be overrepresented among new hires? So in other words, they're hired at a faster rate than non-veterans in these services. And so the 4 that were represented that are over hires are IT services, healthcare, consulting, pharma, 5, and utilities, actually. Obviously, US government and aerospace and defense are also significant overhires of veterans. Underrepresented though among veterans, among hiring, industries for veterans are accounting, banking, entertainment, higher ed, law, marketing, retail, and real estate. So if you're one of those top 5, you're going to be surrounded by actually more veterans than we represent in the economy, which is about, we're at about 6% right now. If you're in one of those bottom groups, you're probably going to be more lonely as you onboard. Question 3, true or false, veterans are more likely than non-veterans to enjoy a jump in seniority during transition from military to civilian. And the majority of you got the answer correct, which is false. Veterans are actually 36% less likely to make a seniority jump, and they're 70% more likely than non-veterans to take a step back in seniority during military transition. Not a big surprise. However, the next question, veterans are more likely than non-veterans to be promoted into a leadership role within 3 years, is true, right? Veterans are actually 39% more likely than non-vets to move into a leadership role within 3 years with a new employer. So that means that actually most veterans obviously are onboarding fairly well, even in industries in which they are the relative minority. Question 6, the 7-Eleven rule of first impressions claims that yet nobody took the bait with any of the stupid answers. It is, research that has suggested that people make 11 judgments about you in the first 7 seconds of contact. And that the 11 judgments are documented as judgments on your education level, your economic status, your credibility, your trustworthiness, your sophistication, your sex role ID, or what we would probably call gender identification now. This was, back before we used that as a term. Your success level or your potential, political background, religious background, ethnic background, and then social, professional, or physical desirability. What that means is that obviously there's a whole lot wrapped up in your onboarding, right? That's going to determine people's biases about you as you move forward, even in the first 30 days. And then finally, question number 7, research suggests a statistically relevant typecast of veteran leaders as superior planners and high in morality, but somewhat contradictorily, low in emotional intelligence and weak in interpersonal skills. So that gives you an idea of sort of some of the, at least, market diffused biases that are out there as you onboard as a veteran with some employers. Takeaways, at least for me, more vets are being hired or onboarded than ever, right? Biases will greet you, but you'll have time to confront them. And especially if you plan well, your new landing is your new start, right? So even though you've gotten into the door, which was your mark of success up to that point, now it's your time to actually get going and move through onboarding with the same level, hopefully, of determination and planning as you had to get the job in the first place. I like to flash this up. This tends to make the rounds in almost every MBA cohort, but it's kind of one of my favorite reference images for getting ready for anything that you know is probably going to have ups and downs, right? And the reason I like to flash this up as we talk about onboarding is just to recognize the fact that just like the job hunt oftentimes has its, you start off excited, you kind of go through a period of doubt, right? That dark swamp of despair, right? But then as you start to learn the process, get more confident, things start to actually make sense, and you start to feel momentum that actually ends up making the whole journey quite a bit more significant for you. And I think that tends to also be the case for that first 30 to 90 days that you're with a new employer. Okay? So get ready to sort of repeat the roller coaster. On to some panel themes that we're going to try to address today with our panelists. So, first, tactics, techniques, and procedures learned from veterans as they've onboarded either to internships or employers. Second, what is the employer's perspective on what works and what doesn't work for veterans as they're onboarding? And then finally, how can you use both of those to prepare yourself for your first 90 days or your first 30 to 90 days with a new employer? All right, so we're really privileged tonight to have 3 great panelists joining us. The first is Sarah Beckwith, who is a Smith MBA, graduated in the class of 2020 from our full-time MBA program, an Army vet, and currently works at PwC. She's joining us from the area of Seattle, Washington. And Tropia is a Marine Corps vet. She works currently with eMentor, who is one of our initiative partners. And she is a writer, educator, and a lawyer. We won't hold that against you, Anne, but anyway, thanks for joining us. And then finally, Seth Travers is a career coach with Smith out of our Smith Office of Career Services. He actually comes from a veteran family, a number of folks in his family who have served, and then he was previously an IT executive and a strategist, so he brings quite a bit of market experience to our panel as well. So with that, I'm actually going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to invite first Sarah to talk a little bit about her experience in transition, but also perhaps more specifically her experience as she onboarded. As I mentioned, Sarah, you did an internship first with PwC, and then you got hired with them, and you've been with them for almost 2 years, I guess, going on 2 years. And so can you talk a little bit about your personal lessons learned in successfully onboarding, with a civilian corporation, having previously served in the military and then gone through the Smith program?
Yeah, Yeah, thanks, Frank. So as Frank said, I worked at PwC as an intern pre-COVID. So I was in person for my internship, and I onboarded in a virtual situation for my full-time, but both at PwC in the Seattle area. I'm going to the office for the first time on Friday, so it will not be remote soon. But did want to just provide a few lessons learned. The first one is just solely internship, and then the other ones is a combined full-time role and internship. So for the internship kind of lesson learned I had is truly you should treat it as if you're interviewing the company. So obviously an internship is a long interview process for you, but once you do get the internship, unless you do something really bad, most likely it will translate into a full-time role. So that being said, you should really, really invest your time during that 6 to 10 week, however long process it is, to see if it's a place that you want to be. So what I did was I would set up about 5 coffee chats, which was very excessive for me every week. I would also diary at the end of every day, which I'm not a diary person, but I figured if I wanted to make a decision at the end of the internship, if this is something that I wanted to pursue, I should probably write it down. So I wrote my key takeaways from the day. Is this somewhere I want to be? Wrote about every interaction I had. So it helped with the relationship building, which is obviously important for a full-time role or an internship. But yeah, it really helped me at the end of my internship to think, is this a place that I wanted to return to? Obviously at the end I did. So next I wanted to just talk about the overall, so full-time role and internship together. I have 4 little buckets that I kind of bucketed everything out into. And I think they're pretty obvious, but I do think a lot of people fail military and civilian at this aspect. So I do think it's worth talking about. The first bucket would be listening and observing. So similar to taking command or going into a new unit, first just listen and learn. Understand the processes and procedures that are in place. Do not come in with these grandiose ideas, like you don't have to prove yourself initially. They do not expect you to be a rock star coming in. They know that you're in the learning phase, especially coming from the military. It's a very different world. So they know that they're going to have to mold you. But that being said, they do want you because you are from the military, you're adaptable. You have that core leadership skills that a lot of people sadly do not have out in the civilian world. So they do want you. So do know that. Next thing is just, it's going to sound kind of silly, but being your authentic self. Don't try to mold into a specific thing that you think the company wants. I had so many intern interviews with people since joining. They say, what can I say to land this role? Like, how can I best position myself, or what are the words I can say? That's not good. Be yourself, and also do know your military skills, know how that you can utilize them, but do know that it's not a 1-for-1 swap. Like, you're going to probably have to tailor your military skill set to the civilian world. I had some feedback that I was a little bit too authoritative when I first got to my full-time role, which kind of upset me a little bit. I thought I was hired as a military person, but then they wanted me to change who I was. But then I realized I just had to kind of mold my approach to be a little bit more diplomatic. And I think since I've been doing that, it's helped a lot. So be your authentic self, know your military skills, but you might have to tailor it a little bit. And then also another bucket I have is on building relationships. And as Frank said, the 7-11 rule, know that first impressions do matter. Recent example is I was at a dinner with PwC about 2 weeks ago. This new guy came in, an associate. He ordered it was all you can eat, but he ordered 2 separate things to take home, a filet and a chicken, impartial to the story. But I had 4 different people come up to me and say, do you know who this guy is? What is he doing? Very bad impression. So just know it really does build relationships. First impressions do matter. And then the last thing, I know I'm talking really fast because I know I have 5 minutes. Apologies. The last thing is know your company or client. So I'm a consultant. So I read every day on the client that I have. So I read the Wall Street Journal. I'm working on an acquisition right now. So I am just knowing all the different acquisitions, the deal landscape in the tech world, just so you're kind of bringing that skill set to the company. And so you can just kind of speak a little bit more educated. So yeah, I think I'm probably over.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thanks. That was all some great points. We'll follow up on some of them as we get into discussion, I'm sure. And if we can move over to you, obviously you've both onboarded yourself, but then, at eMentor and other roles, you've been on the employer side and the coaching side of seeing that. So, on board. And so can you talk a little bit about what you've seen in terms of best practices, but then also Sarah alluded to at least one, but some places where vets maybe stumble in onboarding.
Absolutely. So my background, I am an enlisted USMC veteran. I went on to get a communications degree at New York University and then on to law school at Loyola University in Chicago. So I have onboarded many times and had to navigate that transition from being an enlisted Marine to kind of a more civilized society with civilians. I think, and in my role now at eMentor, and also in my work as a career coach and a writer, I deal a lot with clients and employers who are onboarding all kinds of folks. I think the big takeaways for vets who are transitioning into kind of a more professional role, getting an advanced degree, I think we all need to remember that, the business world, the corporate world is not the military, and it's very different. I think Sarah made a really good point about relationship building. And for me, understanding that component and understanding the culture of the company that you're coming into are essential to your success in your first 60, 90, 120 days in a new role. Take your time to listen to what's going on around you. Be willing to take a step back and know, as Sarah said, you don't have to prove yourself. You're already there. Listen to what people are saying, absorb the culture, and learn how to navigate that environment, because those are the things that are going to integrate you successfully. I think personally, my first position out of the Marine Corps was to work for an Australian national who owned an engineering company in San Diego, where I'm from. And so he was very straightforward and brusque in a way that he kind of appreciated my military training and style of communication. I will tell you that was the first and last time that was appreciated. So we have to be sensitive to kind of folks who may not have grown up into a mission-oriented lifestyle where you see the problem, you solve the problem, you execute, mission completed. That's not the way the world works in most cases. There is often a period of collaboration and consensus, of team building, of kind of listening to others and appreciating the space of having everyone listen to. So that's valuable. And I think as military vets, we are used to hearing orders and delivering on those orders and making results happen. But we're not so good at making space to kind of hear what other people have to say and letting them feel like they've been heard. That's extremely important in almost every aspect of, higher level, kind of upper level management and employment. So as military vets, I really feel like we need to figure out how to listen better, how to improve our interpersonal skills, which if you're with your buddies, is a little bit of a different situation than if you're in a board meeting, and kind of trying to facilitate a discussion. And your way might be the right way. It often is, but you have to make it seem like other people are winning the battle. So those are kind of my big takeaways, and I'm happy to kind of revisit that with any questions as we go on.
That's great, Anne. Thanks. I have a couple thoughts and questions also off of what you said, because it is so important. But over to Seth. So obviously, Seth, you've been both an executive yourself, but then you've also coached, hundreds, I'm sure at this point, people, and largely through transition, but I'm sure also as they've gotten up and running. And, we spend so much time, reciting and rehearsing and everything, all those things that need to go into the interview phase and, scrutinizing the resume, etc. So what can somebody do to kind of prep themselves for what comes next?
Appreciate that, Frank. So I guess the main thing when it comes to you just prepping and meeting with the mentor, coach, or colleague that will help you guide along the way is just being honest. Really being honest about what you want to do, honest about your questions, will help better direct your path. As opposed to thinking the idea of what you're supposed to do and just going along with that pace. So just being honest with your mentor. I always say the mark of a good leader is putting people around them to hold accountable. So if you put people around you to hold you accountable, you'll be more true to what you're doing. So the first thing is honesty. The next thing is just defining your purpose for where you're at. Right? What's the purpose of you being here? Why are you here? And this sometimes is a motivational driver for you at a company, right? You have a purpose for being there, you have a purpose for working. Start to think about that as you have questions with, your mentor or someone you're speaking with. Leverage the people around you. It's going to be a common theme that Sarah, Ann, and myself also mentioned. You want to do that. So the next thing is just importance on the job as you go through, the first 30 days, 90 days, 1, 2, 3 years, is really understand your value and how your value evolves. The reason why a mentor is very important, or someone you can connect with, is because your value is going to evolve, and it may not be the same way it is on day 1 as it is day 900, whatever, right? So understanding, talking through these things will better help guide your path and direct you as you start thinking about your value. Your value may very well shift as a military vet, right? It may shift as you go into the just the normal workforce, as far as where people see your value, and understand how to leverage your value. The next thing is think about the spaces you operate well in, and think about how you can make them practical, right? Because in the military, of course, like Frank said, you take orders, and I think Ann said, you take orders, and that's kind of how you execute. Think about how practical your operational self is and will be in that actual workspace, and look at synergies. I think, Sarah, you mentioned that may not be just easy as this skill is matched with this skill, right? Think about it from a practical standpoint. Look at it from multiple angles. Execution is it's kind of how someone in the military operates, but you have to be able to kind of bend those rules and look at things from a different angle. That will be the catalyst for innovation, as well as looking at new ways to battle challenges. The last thing, like everyone mentioned, is just build relationships. It's so important that working with the coach, working with the mentor, no matter where you're at, build relationships with them, and internally as well too. The main reason is when you come across a situation where it's something's off for the way it's supposed to be, you can't control people, but you can do your best to understand people. And when you understand people, or try to understand people, the effort with that, there's compassion, there's the patience, there's the peace that can say, hey, maybe my way isn't the best way. maybe, and if you look at it like that and you understand where they're coming from, you may be able to add to something or incorporate something in your practice. So I try to be brief just to catch up, but that's pretty much all I have there, Frank.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I tell you, I mean, all three of you, you know, it was bringing me flashbacks to when I onboarded, and what I realized myself was that, like, you're going through all this, you're going through the job hunt and you're all in presentation mode, right? And you're talking a million miles a minute and you go through your interviews and you're trying to prove to them that you will bring value to the organization. But then all of a sudden, as you're onboarding, you're meeting with the next level down who are actually going to be your peers. And it's a whole different story. You have to prove to them that you can listen, right? And that they are valuable to you, which is a very different skill set, especially as a veteran, when you kind of have to push through the bias that they're expecting that you're going to come in and just talk their head off and kind of bulldoze them. So anyway, that was my experience. But I don't want to hog the mic here. I want to get things open to other participants. So Scott, do you mind moderating some questions and answers here for the panel?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to kick it off with a question, but for those who joined a little bit later, as Frank mentioned, if you have a question, you can either raise your hand or you can post it in the chat and I'll facilitate. So my first question, actually, to introduce myself, Scott McGillivray. I'm a first-year MBA student here at Smith. Thanks to our panelists for speaking with us tonight. So when it comes to new positions, one of the things that I've found to be super beneficial is to merely just walk around or meander around the office, introduce myself to my coworkers, try and learn a little bit about them and a little bit about what they do. My question is, in a virtual environment, how can I try to replicate those actions to sort of build those relationships, but in an informal way, I guess?
I'm wondering, Sarah, if you could speak to that, since you said that, you did your internship in person, right? And then you had to go and onboard virtually.
Yeah, I do have that experience. I also had the benefit that I did onboard and I did work here in person in the Seattle office. So it was a little bit more easy for me, I think. But what I did, and because I didn't know everybody, and it was a whole year later after the fact, just my project team, I said, hey, and we have a really good coaching environment at PwC. I have a coach, I have a relationship leader, I have a connectivity partner. So there's a network that I have to help me network, basically. But I would just contact who I was working with, my project leads, and say, hey, I'm really interested in HR, blah, blah, blah. Can you introduce me to somebody over there? And then it just kind of ended up being, like a spider web. And then I just met this person and that person. It's not as organic, but I think if you put in the effort and you're proactive and people do want to help. And I think that's the thing that was a little bit more shocking for me than the military. I feel like in the military, you all just kind of stay in your little world. But in the corporate world, at least at PwC, it's a very collaborative environment and everybody was really willing. So I'll pass it over to anybody else.
And do you have any thoughts? Because you actually just joined eMentor, right? And you've been virtual, I'm sure, in a lot of that process.
It's true. So I've actually been 100% virtual for at least since 2018 for a variety of consulting and employment positions. I think the key in a virtual environment, you're not going to meet around the water cooler. You're not going to meet in the lunchroom or in the kitchen. So you have to actually take a little bit of effort to reach out. And whatever your company's platform is, I worked for a startup that utilized Slack pretty extensively. And we would set up kind of random 30-minute, coffee chats with just like the algorithm would pair you up with someone else at the company. You didn't know what department. And I ended up speaking with people from IT, people from engineering, people from customer success in roles I never would have or departments I never would have interacted with normally. So if you have something like that at your company, definitely take advantage and, sign up for those random meetups and talk to people that you wouldn't normally and have a conversation. This really, for me, goes back to kind of the core of being successful, not just in your career, but like as a human. Create those personal relationships and lean into that and talk to people and listen to people and connect with people in whatever way that is facilitated virtually through your particular place of employment. And maybe that's where you get wouldn't it be cool if we could set up this like weekly roundtable of just like, a 30-minute chat over lunch with people that maybe normally wouldn't, be able to chat with each other. So yeah, take advantage of that virtual environment where you can do that very easily virtually, but maybe would be super hard to coordinate in person.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
I'll add something as well. I think in the military, it's typical to kind of complain about your onboarding experience a lot of times to units, but the military actually does onboarding incredibly well, which you will learn once you get to a civilian organization that more than likely doesn't. And I think what that means, it sounds like, Sarah, you had an incredible organization, and PwC is known to be really great at developing those relationships as sort of a top consultant. But a lot of organizations, especially if you go to kind of a mid-level or a smaller organization, there's a very good chance like you are going to have to create your own path to onboarding. And you may very well actually have to introduce yourself. Like Anne says, there may not be like a Slack algorithm that's going to introduce you to people. You may have to very deliberately say, here are the people I want to get to know, and I want to make sure that they know me. And to be honest with you, there's a really great chance that could happen even in a non-virtual environment.
Yeah, I'll just add on that as well too. Like I said, you have to be adamant about it. It's easy to talk about it, say it. Like Frank said, most companies, the onboarding may not be as pleasant as PwC or the military. It's sometimes they just put you in day two. You're starting your work and that's it. So be adamant about it. But one way to build relationships, and adamant meaning find people you want to reach out to, but don't make the interaction transactional, based on, hey, I'm reaching out to this person for something in return. The idea of coffee chat or just a lunch, sitting around the coffee chat or, around the office talk, you get to know people. And like Ann said, just getting to know people outside of, hey, and go to them with the question. Go with the question that you can learn from, ask a question that they can only answer, around work-life balance, around, challenges they face. These are things that you have questions you can ask them, you can learn something from, but, they're not so transactional, a little bit more sincere, that you're really caring about that person's value. So just be adamant and then make the interaction not just transactional, and then you'll start to kind of develop a web of relationships that you can within the company. And if it's still virtual, great. But if you ever do go back in the office, you already have something to go back to, and you're already that person that's looked at as who can communicate when it comes to upward mobility.
That's great.
Yeah, those are great points.
I wanted to add one quick thing on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
So when I was in person and virtual, I think something that people really did enjoy for these coffee chats. So it seemed that I was being more intentful and not just trying to go, quantity over quality. I would know about that person before and then have my questions that I had for that person. And, you always set up a Google Calendar invite. I would send them agenda beforehand and say, these are the 3 top things that I do want to cover with you. I don't think it was as transactional in that way. It was just I was being very intentful from what I wanted from the conversation, and then we also have bonding and relationships and all that stuff. But I just want people to know I'm not just wasting your time. This is something that I want to get out of this conversation. That's all I wanted to add.
That's a terrific point, Sarah. I will add to that sort of the paradigm shift that I think I had to undergo myself as well, is that I realized very quickly in those meetings that I needed to help people understand not just why I wanted to work with them, but why they should want to work with me. Because unlike in the military, people have no imperative to work with you necessarily. In most organizations. And so they have to want to work with you to get to building.
Those are
Scott,
great
I mean,
adds. So I have another question for everyone else that's on. Again, feel free to fire away. Don't hold back. That's why the panelists are here. But until we get another one, one of the themes we've talked about tonight is just the importance of getting a good first impression. Specifically for internships, how often should I be seeking feedback, or how often should someone be seeking feedback within, let's say, a 10 week-ish period?
So I'll take that since I'm the intern of the group. But again, PwC has a very good internship process. So I'm gonna just I'm going off of that, my example, but I would get feedback after anything I did that was in front of clients. First off, was every time, any deliverable, I would always get feedback. I would probably get feedback multiple times a week. But we had these things called snapshots, which is just kind of like a little mini OER, officer evaluation report, NCOER, where they would provide you overall feedback. And that happened about 3 times. So there were 3 big report cards that I had, but I would get on the job feedback every day, and then I would seek it out all the time. But yeah, I would seek out feedback at all, every time you can. Why not,
But definitely be prepared to take that feedback in a gracious way. I do think that, my personal experience coming from an enlisted background was to kind of explain why I did what I did. That is not always well received. Sometimes the best response is, I hear what you're saying. I will, improve in the future, or tell me how I can improve in the future even better.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for sharing. So we had a comment come in the chat, but I think, Stephen, you may have beat Evan to it. Do you want to share your question?
Sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. I'm Steve Morency, so I'm a transitioning Army officer. Should be out in the next couple months. My question for the room at large was, when it comes to making these impressions or setting up these first impressions, since I know it sounds like onboarding is a less deliberate process than you might find in the military. If you move to a new battalion, you should reach out to the battalion commander. Go 2 levels up, introduce yourself. As a captain, it should be the brigade. Whoever your senior raider is, you should send them an email. Would there be a similar expectation in most civilian employment that I should be reaching out to, somebody more senior than my immediate supervisor?
I will jump in and say no. That generally with the clients that I work with, which are kind of higher level senior executives, you don't want to jump your chain of command by jumping over your immediate supervisor. I would definitely go to that supervisor first and seek out guidance and mentorship, because otherwise it can seem threatening, especially when they are well aware of your background. And it could look, even though it's not intended that way, it could look like you're trying to take their job, or, go over their head to their supervisor. Which if you are the supervisor's supervisor, you're going to wonder why you have a junior employee coming to you first. So that would not be my recommendation. I don't know if anyone else would agree.
Yeah, that's it's interesting because I think what Ann says is 100% right. Before you go to immediate supervisor, it's out of respect. There's a lot of layers that could be affected if you go straight to your someone above your immediate manager. They maybe put in positions where leadership does reach out to you individually and they speak with you. Maybe you put in that position. One thing, when I was in that particular situation, I stayed. I made my immediate manager aware and whatnot. Now, the nature of the conversation could be different, right? If you're just, hey, look, I want to reach out to senior leadership to talk about XYZ work-life balance. I see they manage it well. All right. If and the way I initially talked about it is, if you're going for, a position, or if there's intent behind why you're reaching out to the senior leadership or someone above your manager, that's ill-placed. But if you're going just, hey, I see him often, they come in, you speak, there's nothing wrong with reaching out just to get to know them, right? And that's why I said that it has to be less transactional, more sincere. If it's, and at the same time, it's very appropriate to let your immediate manager know, if you're going to do that. Just because if you go with your senior, someone above your manager, it may look bad. But I said building relationships are important, and one of the ways I helped me develop true business was I spoke to everyone. When I was trying to get into a company, I would email the manager donuts. They would look at their email, see donuts. The message would be something, hey, I'm in the office. I'm stopping by the office. I'm gonna drop some donuts because I wanted their business. I'm gonna drop some donuts, right? Drop off donuts. The next day, he go the day of, he goes, he says, hey, look, here's donuts for the team, right? Made him look good. When I drop the donuts off, I talk to the secretary. Same thing. I talked to some analysts, right? So I talked to multiple layers, analysts, managers, directors, to the point where I got to the CEO. So when I'm going to meet the CEO and we're walking through the company, I'm speaking to everybody, and he asked me how long I worked there. So and it helped me leverage myself in the conversation with him, because he sees I'm building relationships. So build relationships, but do it out of sincerity. Don't do it with intent or just out of malice. Like you're trying, there's intent behind it. But like Ann said, it's important that you notify everyone, or your manager, specifically, that may be affected by it, because it can definitely look like you're stepping over somebody's toes. Generally, no, but if you feel compelled to, make sure you have that conversation and have a reason why.
I would just add, and I would just add that it's very culturally and organizationally dependent as well. Some organizations are very flat, and there's a culture of talking very, amicably with the CEO. Other organizations are more hierarchical, and that would be considered very threatening to everyone between you and the CEO. So I think, the common theme is that you need to get in and learn about the organization through the relationships, understand what the culture is before you kind of launch yourself, at the top and break any glass doing so without recognizing what you're doing.
As a writer by trade, I will tell you that rule number one is know your audience. So before you take any steps, figure out who you're talking to and know what their motivations are and what they want to hear. And that might sound a little manipulative, but it's a good basis for just understanding people.
Great. So next, it looks like we have a question from Evan. Evan, if you're on, I'd like to ask the panelists.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for sharing your stories. I was wondering about, I've been applying to development programs, and I haven't got a chance to talk to somebody that has gone through one or hired somebody that's gone through a development program. So I was wondering if anybody has any opinions on the effectiveness of a leadership development program versus an internship.
I mean, it's definitely something to put on your resume. Not everyone has done it, so it makes you stand out. Lots of people have done internships, not as many, fewer people have done kind of development programs. So, you know, they're both valuable in their own way. That your challenge is going to be how to make that shine on your resume, how to highlight that and show the value of that to potential employers. So I would encourage you to either work with a mentor in that way who has kind of gone through that process, or, you know, a resume writer who has experience kind of drawing out the aspects of that program that are directly relevant to kind of the jobs that you're targeting. But I'm not, one is not better than the other. They're just different.
Yeah, I'll just add, like Ann said, I don't think one is better than the other. It's depending on what you can leverage, what tangible physical experience can you attribute to where you want to be. So if it's something at the end of the program internship, you can say, hey, this is what I've learned as it pertains to where you want to be. I think that, you know, they're both effective.
Does that answer your question, Evan? If you have a follow-up, feel free.
Yes, that was good. Thank you. And I do have a follow-up. I was trying to apply to these various programs, and now I'll include internships in there to kind of pivot because it seems like the only thing I can get any traction on is sales offers, and, you know, in sales. And I don't want to be in sales my entire career. So I was not applying to those types of those types of programs. What is your guys' experience with people kind of using sales to get into a company and get your foot in the door and then pivot out of there?
Think about, break down what you do every day and kind of deconstruct it. You know, when you're in sales, you're also talking to people all the time, you're communicating. So you can leverage that sales experience into communications experience. For example, you're writing emails, you're on the phone, you are disseminating information. Kind of take a step back from your day-to-day and really like break it down to the essentials, and then try to repackage that in different jargon, because every industry uses different terminology. And sometimes that's all it comes down to. You know, are you making copies and, you know, handing them out to executives, or are you disseminating internal communications? Like, there's a big difference between those two things, but they're the same things. So really think about what you're doing and try to reframe that experience in a way that resonates with where you want to go instead of where you have been. Is that helpful?
Yes, I'm just a terrible creative writer, so that's a challenge.
It's very hard, but you know, that is kind of the starting point of how you do that.
I'll add as well too. So since my background is sales, you know, I don't think that sales silos you. I think that there's so many opportunities, and my colleagues as well who were in sales with me, where they branched off elsewhere. You know, I essentially doing executive business development to the education spaces where I kind of navigated. Just to kind of answer that question, think about what you're getting into if you want to do sales. If it's something that you feel like you can manage, you know, manage your own book of business, you can develop relationship. There's a lot. Kind of teaches you how to be your own business owner. But a lot of those skills, you know, are I guess replicated in other roles and opportunities. Kind of what I mentioned before, as far as, you know, looking at what your purpose is and what you want to do. You know, your careers will revolve around your purpose as your purpose evolves. So if sales is an opportunity that can get you to ultimately what you want to do in your purpose, then if you go into that role, think about how you can leverage that. Going back to the initial question, if you're only kind of getting sales opportunities, one thing that we'll look at is maybe look at how you can, first one is build relationships with people outside of the sales realm and the industry you want to be in. And I'll share a document at the end that can help with that. I think Frank, I'll send to Frank so we can send it out. But really look at the industry, what you want to do, and then think about, will this get me ultimately to the point where I can operate in the space I want to operate in for my career? So you can leverage sales, but if you're going to go into, think about what could be the end product that can get you where you want to be.
Thank you.
The only other thing I'd probably add to that, and then we're gonna have to wrap up, is that, like anything, there's a large distance between the consumer and the product or the company, and it all depends on where you are on that continuum. So if you're, out hawking a particular product, that's a lot different than being marketing strategy, right? Internal to the firm, where you can pivot into a lot of different areas potentially. So, well, that unfortunately wraps up our hour. This is a great conversation. I know, I think you had a question, and I will, if the panelists agree, share your contact information if people have follow-on questions. Is that okay with the panel? Great.
Absolutely.
Terrific. So if you had any questions or anything comes to mind, then you can follow up with them, or you can follow up through me with them. You'll get an email from me. It'll include Seth's material that he's agreed to share with us as well. So that concludes it. Sarah and Seth, you've been incredible. This has really been great. I mean, I've got 2 pages of notes here that I've taken just as you all were talking. So a modest token of our appreciation will be heading your way in the mail, Anne and Sarah. So thank you for joining us. Before, I'd also like to mention to folks that, as I mentioned, this was recorded. So the recording will be posted to our Initiative for Veteran Lifelong Leadership webpage. You can find that in my signature block and everything that I send you. It's also goumd.edu/IVL2 for a short link that you can access it through. And then if you'd like to continue to join us for future events and continue to be part of our community, if you're enrolled with us or you're an alumni of Smith, then you're welcome to join our Maryland Smith Vets LinkedIn group. If you're part of the Big Ten, you can join our Big Ten Veterans in Business group that we co-host. And then, of course, everyone is welcome to follow us through our Initiative for Veteran Lifelong Leadership LinkedIn group, or to follow that webpage that I showcased to you earlier. With that, I'm going to go ahead and conclude both our recording as well as our event. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, panel, for sharing your insights. And I hope you all have a terrific evening and rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.